Okay, so I'm so excited to do our third installment of Meet the Author. So the Meet the Author series is something very near and dear to my heart. And I'm so happy that my mother is here for her first Meet the Author here at J2 Workspace because it's love of books. The love of books came from my parents, and a love of writing. I think is innate to our family. And so when we had this space and I started to get to meet authors like Dr. Marcus Bright and et cetera, I said, we really need an opportunity to celebrate, to elevate our stories, our voices. Oftentimes, our stories are not often heard. Oftentimes, we're not published. Oftentimes, we don't get a lot of the critical acclaim that we should. And so, this is our homage as JT Workspace to our local Black writers here in South Florida. So I want to say thank you again, Dr. Bright, for coming and spending your time with us on a Monday evening. It is always hard to get here on a Monday, but I appreciate that. If you guys know anything about Florida traffic, it is not the easiest time to come after work to be here. And so I've been blessed to know quite a few authors, including yourself. And so I like to always start about how do we know each other first and foremost before we get into the nitty gritty of the book and who you are and the whys of what you do. And so, first and foremost, we know each other through some mutual connections. And I was asked to be a part of MD Youth Action Council, of which you run and are a part. And then you were also our keynote speaker for BikeCon 2024. Let's clap it up for Vargas being our keynote speaker and really setting the tone for what we were doing for BikeCon for 2024. So I really appreciate it. So that's how we know each other. We've got these points of synergies, points of working together in the community. So we don't just talk about it. We don't just write about it, but we be about it. We're in the action. We do the thing. So do you want to just high level talk a little bit about who you are and why you do the things that you did before we even get into the books and all that?
Well, I think that's a good jumping off point because we were connected by a gentleman named Tamonte Leary, who works for Microsoft. And that really emanated. My first book was called Brighter Ways Forward, Reflections on Sports, Tech, and Socioeconomic Mobility. And many of you recall in 2020 on, there was a tech boom here where I guess tech and crypto, so to speak. But for a time, we led the nation in tech job sector growth, and number one in tech job sector mobility. And it happened at a time when we also led the nation in housing unaffordability. And so, when it came time to renew leases, folks were asking for double, triple, quadruple the amount. And you had all of these high-paying tech jobs coming into South Florida that people here were not qualified for. And I knew from working in the school system for many years that the fundamentals, students did not have the fundamentals to even be on the trajectory to qualify for it. And so that's what brought me connected with Tamonte. I said, the first thing, can we just get some computer science? Can we try to inspire with some tech, some STEM career role models? I was at Miami Northwestern High School today, was in a classroom, and I said, who all has met an engineer? One hand went up out of 30, 1 out of 30. So if you, any kind of engineer, so that is the depth in terms of the exposure gap that we have. And so a lot of my career has been about bridging some of those gaps. Taught at 5 universities. I've been an administrator at 3. Ran the 5,000 Role Models of Excellence, or was an administrator for the 5,000 Role Models of Excellence project, which is a big dropout prevention and mentorship program in 130 schools in Miami-Dade County. Ran a national organization called Education for a Better America. We did programming in 15 different cities, but it's all been about building bridges, about creating processes, about trying to build infrastructures of opportunity to get people to elevate in their purpose.
Yes, it's all. I'm like, this is the book right
here. To go to a higher level in their individual purpose, but then also do something to transform our society in a better way.
I love that. So he gave you like a very high level overview of this latest book, and we will absolutely dive in. So when I was reading the book, you put in the preface. So I want to just talk about this for a second. You put in the preface about the flash floods that happened in June 2024. Now, I know that this book was published or was on its way to being published before then. So I want to talk about the process of like saying, like, I think it's so important for you to have told that story and stopping, like, I guess maybe the printing press. I'm not exactly sure what the process was around you doing that. And then the story that you tell is so powerful. And I also have a story around what happened in June 2024. Not as dramatic, I don't think, as yours, but I'll just go really quickly around my story and then we'll talk about yours, because I think this is one of those things that's going to live in my memory, which I went out to do a business meeting. I had no idea that it was like, I mean, okay, I knew it was going to rain because, I mean, it always rains in South Florida. What's the big deal? So I go, I do this business meeting. And then all of a sudden, like, became like black clouds. And then like the rain started coming down. I was like, oh, I don't know if I can get home. That's how bad it was. I wasn't even sure like I could get home. And those of you guys who know that I don't even drive anymore. I don't have my own car. I take Uber or Lyft or whatever. So I had a friend who worked across the street, and she said to me, Kamara, I'll come pick you up. I said, okay, cool. Sounds good. And so I like got all my stuff together, and I'm like, getting everything set up as much as I can. And I walk, and the rain and and like the wind and the puddles are going, and like it's just insane. And I couldn't see where I was going, and I fell. And my book bag was so heavy, it brought me down. She said, you look like a turtle on its back. She not lying. I was underneath the water. The sewage water is going in front of me. I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, this is insane. I'm like, I mean, not that I thought I could drown, but it was actually really, it was crazy. She's like, I saw your legs go up. And I was like, and I was sitting here, and it's just, this is a street that I know all the time. It's just a regular street. And there's water rushing literally over my head. And I pop up, and I'm drenched in water. I get in her car, and I'm like, yo, do you want me to get out? Because I'm like drenched. She's like, you would say no, let's go. And then we're like slowly going. And she's in an SUV. We don't even know if we can make it just the 2 miles to my home, let alone the 5 miles to her home. And so we really bonded. I mean, this is my friend anyway, but we really bonded. And so when I was reading that, and I was reading what happened to you, I think there's so many stories that we're going to see about what happened and around like the trauma of what that was to a degree. But you came and you were like, I need to make this a preface in my book. And I was like, why? Why would you make this a story? So it's just so resonated. There are lots of places resonated with me, but I already knew, I knew you were working on
What
this
street
book.
were you on?
I was on 123rd in North Miami.
Okay.
Yeah. So Fort Lauderdale Airport was closed. I mean, so a lot of the things that were happening were North Miami-Dade, and then South Broward, and then obviously some South Miami-Dade. But people are used to that kind of flooding in certain parts of Miami-Dade, but like where I was, we were not used to that kind of flash floods happening, right? And like people were like, we're in some serious trouble. And there's some trauma that's going on. I mean, I know to this day there are people who are still trying to figure out how to get their cars right, all kinds of things that we were not prepared for these unforeseen circumstances as it related to expenses in particular. So I was reading your story about abandoning the car and then going to some random building, going up to the second floor, and then trying to go back into the car, and you're realizing, you know what, my life is more important than this material possession that I have. And so, yes, you can talk about that, but also, like, why did you make that the preface of the book?
Well, when I abandoned, and actually it happened right down the street on Atlantic Shores Boulevard. Yeah.
Right down the street here.
Right down the street.
Atlantic Shores Boulevard.
So I was coming from downtown Miami in a meeting, and something told me, he said, I might want to take the Tri-Rail or something to not, because he was coming down with fury, but I didn't know. I would just recently moved to Hollandale Beach on the beach like a year ago. So I didn't know the magnitude of the flooding here. And I made it to 95, got up, and then Hollandale Beach Boulevard. main road, stay on the main road, but it was closed. They shut it
Yep.
at like US 1. So and then there was a huge line, and I knew the my GPS said shut. So I said, let me venture off into the side road and try to get. I was just trying to get home, and I ventured into the side road, and it was like right before Dixie.
Okay.
It's Dixie Highway. This road right
Yeah,
here.
that's right. Yeah, so we're like it's all right
Yeah,
here. Yeah.
right before. And so you come down, and I'm trying to navigate because the streets they go like the water is like rising like it's like different levels. So I turn, it veers me, it takes me to Atlantic Shores, and I get on the Atlantic Shores, and the water keeps on rising. It just keeps on rising, rising. I'm driving. I had never been in it before, but I'm thinking about Hurricane Katrina because I'd only seen this in TV. So you driving, and it's a car, and the water's like this. I'm like, and I'm at an intersection, and there's cars behind me, and it's still rising, and it's still and there's nowhere to go. So at this point I'm just looking around. I'm like, where is there some high ground? And I just pulled my car up on a curb, abandoned the car, and then ran up to the second floor of an apartment building right there in Atlantic Shores, and
Wow.
was just thinking. And I was just, that moment, like you said, I wasn't worried about what was in the car or my car, and there was some expensive stuff in there. But it brought me back to like the two most important things, in my life right now. That's my wife, Angelina, who's here, and my son in New York. And really, it was the impetus for this particular book because there's a book that preceded it called Bridges to a Brighter Future, about four bridges. You cross these bridges: the Belief Bridge, Systems Bridge, Windows Bridge, Execution Bridge, to get to your goal. But then, um, there's as you mentioned that you were in between New York and New Jersey.
Yeah.
When you're going on the George Washington Bridge, you can go on the lower level or the upper
Listen,
level.
that's one of my questions. There we go. There we go.
You can go on each level. And I said, I need to go. And really, it really has been years since I met my wife, really, because, life will bring certain challenges to you. And she is so exceptional in terms of her level, in terms of my ideal in so many ways. And I said, I have to get better in many areas. I have to, my belief has to be at a higher level. The systems that I operate in must be at a higher level. I have to create higher level windows of opportunity, and then I have to execute at a higher level. So what does that look like? And then I've always been fascinated with public policy and public programming, and so it works the same way I think in society. And then with my son being in New York City, it's just you got to be at a different level to be able to make that kind of commute and also be in his life. And so I had to get better, and so that was really the genesis of this book, going higher in our purpose. I had to first go higher in my purpose, and then I've always been passionate. I think my God-given purpose is to build infrastructures of opportunity for people. So that moment, that flood really just brought me to the fragility of life, and then really ultimately what is most important to you and what is your why, and keep tapping into that. But yeah, it just brought me to the core of what really matters in life.
Listen, we did not really talk about what we were going to talk about today. And you have like hit some of my points. I was like, so we're already like synergetic. I enjoy that. The analogy of the GW Bridge, the infrastructure for the opportunities of life. So we're going to dig deeper into that. But since I want to go a little bit in chronological order, you really break down the book by, I would say, like four larger tenants, and then you have levels to each of the tenants. So we'll start with this systems level, and I'm going back and forth because I'm not gonna give you all the tips to the book. You got to go buy the book, okay? But systems level 4 is about leadership.
Okay.
And I wanted to talk a little bit about this because I think that the word leadership is thrown around quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it's thought about quite a bit, right? We are in the middle of a presidential election, and arguably the US president is considered one of the, if not the most important leader in the free world. So, just in general, what are your general thoughts about leadership? What is your definition? And then, like, where do you think that maybe some people get it wrong? Because I think, based off of what I'm listening to in your book, I think you have some theories around like how people get it wrong around what leadership actually is.
Yeah. So she mentioned level 4 being leadership. That means there are 3 other levels. Let me just briefly go. Leadership, the systems level 1 is that you just having a system of your own development in terms of developing your capacity, it could be your skill set. But then that's the second bridge. So after you cross the belief bridge, you get your own capacity for your own skill set. And then systems level 2 is actually being able to apply it. It's one thing to be able to, you can shoot 40 in the gym by yourself, but can you go on the floor and be effective? And then the third one is then taking your individual talent and integrating, being a part of a team, being a part of a team system. And the fourth one, the leadership level, is actually leading a team, starting a company, starting an organization, uh, leading something. And I think, for to continue with the basketball analogy, I was a basketball on a star in high school, but I was a great player, but I was not a great leader because I was just focused on kind of scoring, and then you can be an exceptional player, but if you aren't making the people around you better, then it limits ultimately where the group as a whole can come. So I think that the zenith of leadership is being able to produce other leaders and being able to pour into other leaders. And so as it pertains to the presidential election, I think, you know, if it's Harris or Trump, their ability to make the people, make their departments under them better, or those, if it's the Secretary of Education, Health and Human Services, those different entities, economic. All the whole. How are you making the people? I guess it would start with their core team in terms of how they're putting their people in a position to elevate in their own particular gift, and then empowering them to lead others. Because that's like the ultimate domino effect in
Yeah.
terms of the presidency of the United States. But just in our individual lives, the groups or even our family or the people that we're around, and the influence that we have, are we using that influence to produce other leaders, other people who can make an impact on the world?
Yeah. And so I went to number two, which was systems, and I'm going to go back there. But let me also go back to the foundation, which is belief. Belief in 4 levels, right? So belief, the first level is foundation. Second is hope, and then third you had faith, and then fourth, living in faith.
Yeah.
And so the third and the fourth, I thought, man, I love that, because you talk about having faith,
Right.
but then there's a difference between having faith and then fourth, living in faith. Can you explain a little bit more around the differentiality that you find there?
Yeah, so kind of in your belief journey, I think that there are all kind of big dreams and big aspirations that we may have, or big things that we want to accomplish that we really may not really believe that we can do it. And so the belief level 1 is simply just crossing the belief threshold, winning enough of the belief battles, faith versus fear, doubt and worry versus I can do it, I'm inadequate versus I have more than enough. So if you've crossed the threshold, that's one. And then after you cross the threshold, level 2 is just sustaining hope.
Mm.
So, this is when your belief hits some adversity. But hope is when you can see some kind of light at the end of the tunnel. And that end of the tunnel, Dr. King said that hope is the final refusal to give up. I can see some light. How can I sustain the hope? And then level 3 is when hope transitions into faith. There are some times when the mountain looks too big. I can't even see any hope. I can't see a light at the end of the tunnel. And that's when you have to revert back to what the Bible said. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And so faith is when you just keep taking a step, and you're scared, and you keep doing it. So that's when your hope transitions to faith. Now, it's one thing to do it once, right? The example I use in the book that moves you to level 4 is that when you're living in faith.
Yeah.
So Dr. King, since I use him in his early days with the Montgomery bus boycott, I use an example in February. So Rosa Parks refuses to surrender her seat, December 1955. King is thrust into the spotlight, leads this boycott. He starts to get a lot of attention, good and bad, because by February he's getting 40 death threats a day.
Mm.
people calling the house saying we're gonna blow your brains out if you don't leave town now. And I mean, threatening 40 calls a day. And he tells this story in a speech called "A Knock at Midnight" that it just got to him one night, and he says he just got on his knees and he prayed over a cup of coffee. He says, and he said the guy responded and said that just keep standing up for justice and know that I'll be there for you until the end of the earth. So for him to maintain that faith even after his house being bombed, to the end of the Montgomery bus boycott, to ultimately opening up that bus system, that's still free. But for him to not take the off ramp, he could have easily said he had a PhD from Boston University. He could have went on back up north, got him a tenured professor job,
That's right.
been the senior pastor somewhere, and lived a nice, comfortable life, and just made speeches about how he did the boycott for the rest of his life and been comfortable. But to keep pushing yourself, keep pushing you. He kept going. He kept, he formed the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. The Albany movement, Birmingham, Selma, Chicago, taking the stance against Vietnam, going into Memphis. He kept going. That's living in faith. You keep going back. You keep choosing not to take an off ramp, but to stay on the on ramp and the faith, living in faith. Like Harriet Tubman, you get yourself free. You go back a couple times, and hey, she kept going back.
Yeah.
And even during the Civil War, became a spy
That's right.
in South Carolina. Like that's like living in faith. Like Frederick Douglass, he could have stopped. So if you consistently are doing it, you're taking whatever in your own life, leaps of faith, like leaps pushing yourself beyond, then I think that you're living in faith. So that's kind of the breakdown of the levels. So there are some things that, belief can be fragile. You got to go back and just keep going past the threshold. Even things in my own mind, I don't know how this is going to happen. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I just remind myself I have to win these belief battles. And when your belief becomes dominant in whatever level that you cross, now you can cross it now just passing the belief battle. You can cross it, but it's crossing it at a lower level.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of what the book is about. Crossing it, because the first book I just had it as a bridge. I was like, cool, you can go across, but like I need to be at a little bit higher level. I need to be at a higher level. What just life, the circumstances in life, in terms of me not losing like what's most important to me. I have to be at the highest level I can be at in each area, in each bridge.
So I'm like going back and forth about where I want to go because I had like a whole script. But when I'm hearing you speak, you touched upon something that even when I'm hearing you speak, that comes to mind. And when I was reading the book, it comes to mind. Your historical references, my brother, are on point. Like, so I know that you're a professor, you have your doctorate, but I thought there was something so humanizing around the personal stories as it related to the historical references. And then not only did you do the historical references, but then you also made it more personal around like how this actually related to yourself in your own life, what story related to this particular philosophy. Can you talk a little bit more about like how you decided which historical figures, which stories you're going to do as it related to these concepts? And I will say, I know a lot about our brother, Dr. Martin Luther King, but you gave him another depth that I don't often see. So I want to also just congratulate you on that, period. Like you think you know Dr. King, I'm guaranteed, read this book and you'll get to know him on a whole nother level.
Yeah, I mean, he's just been a hero of mine, and Frederick Douglass. And when I mentioned to your mother that I grew up in a town called Martin, Tennessee, and my mom was a Sunday school teacher, and she was also over the Black History program, and she would put all these big posters of figures in Black history around the church, and then after February, she'd come home and then she put them all across the house. And so maybe subconsciously, as I was looking at Benjamin Banneker and Ida B. Wells and all of these, subconsciously I wanted to be like them. I wanted to make a historic social impact. And the people that I'm most closely aligned with for various reasons were Frederick Douglass, Dr. King, W.B. Du Bois. Really, and so I want to try to learn from them in different aspects of life, and how they overcame adversity, and especially those, they dealt with the threat of death daily. And so um, how do you tap into that? There's a deeper inner courage and inner core
Yeah.
that I think it's missing like today. But how do you tap into that? And but also dealing with, King, they dealt with people trying to kill them from the outside, but then they also dealt with tremendous envy and jealousy
Mm.
from people on the inside. And so how do you deal with both of those factors?
Yeah.
And then you got all kind of different dynamics. King was trying to build an organization. Douglas was writing and speaking basically across the country under different, under tremendous threat. He had to go to run to Europe. He had the Fugitive Slave Act. Like, what keeps you going? And then they both suffered from depression.
Mm.
They had really serious bouts of depression. So they were struggling inside, but still mustered up enough energy to lock in on their purpose. Like, you have to be driven by a higher purpose to keep going, and to keep striving when, again, you can take so many on ramps. And so I think there are elements of their stories, because I pull a lot from them, that
Yeah.
are transferable to any of our walks of life.
Yeah. I love that. Um, so we talked about uh, belief. We talked about systems. Now we're going to go to windows.
Mhm.
You start the windows in a way that I didn't actually really think about, which is this idea of personal systems.
Yeah.
So I love that. So we'll go there because I was like, oh, this is what I want to talk about. But then I got to Windows level 3, which was the policy entrepreneur.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna just read, and I copy paste this into my notes. I'm gonna read this, and then we'll talk about it, because this is in the entrepreneurial world. I've heard many iterations of what it means to be an entrepreneur, different names as it relates to entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Never heard something called policy entrepreneur. And I'm thinking this is kind of novel, and I feel like I'm going in this way. So I'm really also excited, just personally. So I'm going to just read a few things. Windows level 3 involves the notion of coupling the distinct problem, policy, and politics streams. This entails the interplay between solutions and challenges, proposals and political nuances, as well as the strategic introduction of alternatives based on evolving agendas. I'm going to pause. Then you go into what I love, which is some of the historical and contemporary figures who do some of this work. People like Desmond Meade became policy entrepreneurs and elevated all three streams to help create a window of opportunity for policy to be passed. Meade worked for years in the state of Florida, holla Florida, to dramatize the plight of formerly incarcerated persons who had a nearly impossible journey to regaining their right to vote. You see why I said this because you see where we are in the middle of people trying to suppress our vote. I want to talk about somebody who is making sure that people can vote. Meade and others in the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition worked to host marches and rallies to dramatize the problem, elevated the politics stream by working with legislatures and getting enough signatures to put a referendum on the ballot, and played a key role in shaping the Amendment 4 legislation that restored voting rights to over 1.4 million Floridians with past felony convictions. So I'm going to pause there. Let's give it up to our brother me, because here we are in Florida. We're talking about voter suppression. We need to fight for our right. But then he talked about a woman that I actually have met personally, Congressman Frederica Wilson. If you guys don't know who she is my lady who comes with the cowboy hats on. Okay. So then you say, I witnessed Congresswoman Frederica Wilson be a policy entrepreneur in her efforts to get legislation passed to establish the United States Commission on the Social Status of Black Men and Boys. Wilson played a key role in authoring, proposing, and shepherding the legislation through her role in Congress. She made efforts to elevate systemic problems facing Black men and boys through her hosting of many forums and events that focused on the issue, and through her founding of the 5,000 Role Models of Excellence Project, a dropout prevention and mentorship program that served thousands of boys of color annually. Noteworthy was Wilson's adept navigation of the politics stream, transcending partisan divides to garner bipartisan support for the bill. This is really important because, as we know, those of us who are here in Florida, Florida feels very partisan, and it's hard to get bipartisan legislature passed, especially when you say words that are specifically for people of color under this administration. So the fact that she could do this, and you highlighted this, that was just amazing. So, by fostering collaboration across party lines, she harnessed a unified front, exemplifying the transformative potential of bridging ideological gaps for the collective good. This bipartisan spirit culminated in the co-sponsorship of the bill by, we can, whatever we think about this man, but this is the name that's coming up, y'all, by Republican Senator Marco Rubio, and its subsequent enactment into law, and we can think about what we think about this man, into law by President Donald Trump, a testament to the broader impact of effective policy entrepreneurship transcending political boundaries. Whew.
Well, there was a unique mix. So
yeah, that's a unique mix, but that's still, I was just like, this is a great story, and all the things that you're talking about.
That highlights she had to seize a specific window of opportunity. The window's bridge, and there's a little theory in it, so you got to kind of hang.
Yeah, there we go.
It's theoretical. There's a man named John Kingdon who wrote about a theory of the multiple streams theory. So basically, it's a public policy theory when three streams are elevated at the same time. The problem stream. So dramatizing the problem. So you think about Dr. King marches. That's why I mentioned Desmond Meade. I met Desmond when he was in 2011, when he was a law student at FIU, and he was talking about. He was so passionate about. I was like, man, I might change my dissertation topic. I need to write about this. And then, but like he continued. This was like it wasn't an issue in terms of formerly incarcerated individuals not having the right to vote in Florida.
Yeah.
So he. Barnstormed the state basically and built coalitions around it and just kept garnering support and just continued to elevate and dramatize, lift that problem. So we mentioned, King with segregation and not having the ability to write. That was the purpose of a march is to dramatize, elevate a problem. Problem got to be elevated. Then you got to have a politics stream. So the politics stream, and this could be in your own personal life, that's the decision maker. And the politics, and I mentioned the politicians in the Florida state legislature, if you want to get something passed or whatever. The problem could be whatever societal problem that you want to address, even your business wants to address. Politics streams are the gatekeepers, those are the decision makers that you need to get past. You gotta do it, you gotta elevate that. So if we talk about the 64 Civil Rights Act, Lyndon Johnson is in office. Following Kennedy, he said, I want to pass this bill to honor Kennedy. So the stream is in place in a way that it wasn't ever before, right? The politics with Frederica Wilson and getting that bill passed, the reason why it was passed was because it came right after in the summer of 2020, right after the killing of George Floyd, when you had the racial reckoning. So you already had, so the Floyd killing elevated the problem stream. It's super high. We got to do something. Politics stream. She had worked with Rubio in Florida on a version of this and just got him to co-sponsor it. And then the policy stream is that the policy stream in our individual life, that can be our skill set. You apply the policy to the problem. You get it? Apply policy. That could be my skill set or my product or my business or whatever service I provide. I'm going to apply that to a problem. But then I need a gatekeeper, the politics to all of them got to be elevated. So that's why I say the 2020 just having it at a special moment, because the summer before and then 2019, we always, when I was at the Role Models, we would always carry boys to DC Actually, they're bringing a group up this week for the Congressional Black Caucus. But we went in May of 2019, and I actually spoke at the press conference to introduce the Commission on the Social Status of Black Men and Boys. This is just a bill. I mean, there are thousands of bills that get introduced, right? There's a lot, but at least the bill was out there. At that point, it wasn't going anywhere though, right? But that Floyd elevated the problem stream, and then I guess the right was like, let's do a little something, let's do something, and that was actually the only piece of national legislation that was passed in the wake of George Floyd.
Oh wow!
But because she already had that stream in place, the problem with the rest of the Floyd movement, in my view, was that when you had that problem stream, when everybody's protesting, there was no policy attached to it. Like, we just mad. What a policy is though? We just mad, but there was no policy with it. So in our own lives, or even the issues that we're trying to address here, first, that's why I always include some kind of policy recommendation.
We're going to get there.
And then we push policies even through the trust. Yeah. I'm trying to put the policy in the atmosphere. So I'm trying to put it up. Hey, this is something that we need. The other streams might not be open yet, but I'm going to keep lifting it. Like, there's a policy universal, there's a universal early learning. I've been lifting it for like over a year, but eventually these other ones there's going to be something to dramatize in the media. That's why we need this. And there'll be the right politician who wants to prioritize it, who will have enough juice to push it over the line.
That's
right there. So even in your own personal life, whatever your business or your skill set might be, you keep pushing that out there. Yeah. You keep pushing it out there, and eventually the problem will present itself, and eventually you'll have a decision maker that's favorable enough for the window will be open. Now, the window it's not a forever window. You know what I'm saying? You couldn't pass the social status of Black men and boys right now.
Right.
With this, with the anti-DEI, you can't even say black. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you can barely even say it. So like,
you can't even say DEI. I mean,
it's tough. So seizing windows of opportunity, I think that that's essentially. And if you're a policy entrepreneur, you can couple all three of those streams. Because it's one like policy level. I mean, the level one is like you can elevate one. Like, there are some people that they like activists. Like they specialize in and protest and getting issues up, and then if there's a police shooting, they're gonna be right there. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're gonna be like, but they operate only in that lane, right? You can elevate that. Now, if you can do that and throw some policy in there, that's two lanes. And if you can do that and work with the politics, that's three lanes. So it's in your own life. You may need to partner with somebody who specializes in a different lane. Like, even now, like, there's a youth interrogation legislation, and I know some general parameters, but I'm not writing the exact policy. So the Miami-Dade County Public Defender, Carlos Martinez, we elevated the problem enough. He was like, you know what, man, I like this. We need to do something about this. I said, well, we need legislation that we can, because you have to like write the legislation for these policymakers. You got to write it for them. Hey, just file this bill right here. Like, file now. I don't know how to write the bill exactly. So his team, Martinez and them, they're writing the bill. As soon as he gets that bill, we're about to have 3 advocacy agenda events. I'm putting him on it. We're gonna elevate this problem. Basically, there's a youth intern. Basically, they can arrest kids right now and not, they can waive the right to counsel. Did you all see When They See Us in the exonerated Central Park? So yeah, you can. So you can have, and with these body cameras, kids are just admitting, there's something happens in there. What happened? Man, he did it. Johnny did it, and then they're using that right there. They're using that to lock folks up and put a criminal record on them, when they haven't been involved. The parent doesn't even know, and then next thing you know, you're a parent and your kid's at the police station. He's already been charged. He's already confessed with no legal counsel. So kind of dramatizing that. You got to drama. So in this case, I'm gonna do the dramatizing. He write the legislation, and then we both go. We try to build a coalition. Try to see what coalition, because the Republicans have a super duper majority in the Senate. So you got to kind of find what politician will file it for you, who has some juice in the House and the Senate, who will carry it, and all that kind of thing. So in terms of so in some sense, in some instances, one can be if you can do all three of those, then you're an entrepreneur in that lane.
I love
But if you
that.
can just do one, then you're doing all right too. So,
You're doing all right too.
yeah.
Listen, I'm going to start wrapping this up. So I just want to know that the last pillar is execution. We're not going to go in depth. You guys are going to have to go ahead and buy the book and read the book. But I do want to go to the policies. You have the policy recommendations, which I think you've made a beautiful point as to why it's so important for you to have the policy recommendations at the end of your book. Any particular policy you would like to highlight that's in the book currently?
Yes, we need universal coverage, or at least a public option for universal early learning coverage.
Mm.
So what's that mean? Right now we have universal coverage when your child hits kindergarten. You can take them to kindergarten or him or her to kindergarten and it's fully covered. Why are we waiting until you're 5 years old? Like the gaps are enormous in terms of our children going into kindergarten already behind, and then you stay behind by third grade. In third grade, you're supposed to be reading to learn, not learning to read. And it's like two cohorts from there. If you're not reading to learn in the third grade, you're on one trajectory. If you're not, you're on a different trajectory. You're 6 times more likely to to be incarcerated. You're 5 times. I mean, there's just, and so this early learning portion, it's like a hodgepodge. It's unaffordable for many. It's inaccessible. The teachers are poorly paid.
Yeah.
I mean, you make more working, at Walmart or Target. I mean, nothing against it, but like you make more that, so you're not going to go. I mean, it's just the system is broken, and because we're not making that commitment and investment on the front end, we're paying for on the back end in terms of in terms of the criminal justice system. And so I think the model that I point to it is in New York. They passed universal pre-K.
Yeah.
So it's universal in 2014. That's because the streams came together because Mayor Bill de Blasio, he ran on that. When is the last time that you seen a politician, particularly in the executive level, run on something education? Like he ran on that.
Yeah.
Every speech was universal pre-K. We need universal pre-K for 4-year-old. He laid the science out. He had all of that ready, and he got in there. He got Cuomo to put a tax on those making over $500,000 a year to pay for it and moving forward. So now every 4-year-old in New York City, you get free full day pre-K, free full day pre-K. In Florida, you got 3 hours. And also it has to be at a certain standard. So you can either go attached to a New York City elementary school or your contract with community-based organizations, but it has to be at a certain standard of pay, the whole nine, and the quality. So you have like highly qualified professionals who want to be teachers, who want to be in there, who are compensated, at a decent level. And so I think the next step is doing that for 3 and 2. I mean, people are paying mortgage payments and childcare.
Yes, they are.
And so
It's crazy.
And so we just send them, if you can't do it, you just send them to Big Mama in them house, whoever is down the street. And Big Mama means, well, Big Mama's not a pro. I got a PhD. I'm not a pro. I can't teach my son. I mean, I'm not a pro in terms of teaching him how to read. I can encourage, and let's try to read to him. But like, I'm not. I need a pro. Like with him, he was an active young man, and I need somebody who has studied this, who is really. And I've seen night and day difference with my own son, night and day. With being with universal pre-K and then even in kindergarten, unfortunately, we could pay for him to be, in high quality, early learning, from when he was a very young age, but like, there's just the inequities start there, and if we don't address that, most of the brain development happens, before age 4.
That's right.
If we don't address that gap, then we just putting on band-aids like forever. And so I think and it makes economic sense. If I have a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old, if let's say mom is staying at home or whatever, if mom can to a fully covered, high quality situation, then she's back in the workforce, and you have another earner in the house. So it makes economic sense as well, man. So if you're talking about an economic stimulus for adults and something that that increases the positive trajectory of students, and it makes our community safer. Because ultimately, like, we all pay. I think I put this in the book too. Because when students don't get that early head start, when they fall behind academically, you're more susceptible to dropping out of school. You drop out, high school dropouts 5 times more likely to be incarcerated. And so now we have a lot of right now, in some of the most dangerous neighborhoods, you have a lot of particularly young men who and one of the other recommendations is they should be leaving high school with an industry recognized credential, something that makes you economically viable for trade or something to make you viable, because right now you have a lot of young people out here, just people out here, period, being mass marketed all of this materialism on social media, all of this expensive lifestyle, and no skill set, no credentials to go get it in a legal way. And I gotta have it. And so it's a recipe for disaster, and it makes it makes us safer. I mean, it makes us less safe walking out the door. So some of these issues, particularly when it comes to criminal justice, we think that that's them. It doesn't really apply to me. No, it affects everybody. It affects us all. It's like, I went with my wife to her sister had I'm not her sister. I'm just kidding. Let's say any of us, we've all been in this situation. Let's say you go to if you've been to a group dinner, and I'm not a big fan of group dinner. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not a big fan of group dinner, because you can go on there. Let's say it's a steakhouse. Steaks start. It's one of those Kumar steakhouses. Steaks started. Steaks started at $100. Steaks started at $100. It's true story. True story. Started 95, 99. Steaks start. So then they start going up. So everybody ordering steaks, and not everybody, they ordering steaks, but then you got chicken that's like 35. I said, let me get the chicken. And let's say you get chicken and water. Let's say you get chicken and water, and that's what you order, chicken and water. But somebody no order appetizer for the table. Somebody. Oh, right. You want another drink? Yeah, bring another drink. Steak, yeah. Let me try that side too. You want desserts? Yeah, let me get the dessert too. So your bill is 40. Tax and tip 50. Their bill is 400 a piece, and then the bill comes. It's like, what they say?
Split.
We all pay for it. We all in this. We all pay for it. We're all invested, and even if you think something doesn't impact you, you're gonna be impacted because we all gonna pay the tax.
We all been there. That's why everybody laughing over here. We all like, oh yeah, we'd have been there. We'd have been there. We all gonna pay that tax.
We all paying the tax.
Listen, since you brought up your wife and you talked about your son quite a bit, so you start the book way before the preface and everything and the acknowledgments, talking about your wife and your son. Your title and the titles of all of your books are a nod to your last name, which I'm assuming is about legacy. There's something about putting so you also have a great last name, Bright. I mean, it's so easy to do different things around it. But talk to us a little bit about the importance of putting your name on it, stamping your name on it, but also the acknowledgement of family, the marriage of the personal and the professional.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reason why I'm able to I know about Frederick Douglass and Dr. King, and somebody wrote about it. Somebody documented the story. And I think that when I had my son, I really started thinking about legacy, and I started researching my family tree, because when you go to family reunion, they have the family trees. And even when I was speaking before with your mom, and I said, so you've
had a very long conversation with my mother.
South Carolina. But I started to identify because I thought about, my mom grew up picking cotton in West Tennessee, and I'm the first generation of my family not to pick cotton since arriving on this continent. So they made so many sacrifices so that I could have a better way of life. And her father and mother and my grandfather, I mean, they were just giants in their own way. I mean, you're talking about in my grandfather on my mother's side, grows up sharecropping, um, shows up at Tennessee State University with $5, a wing and a prayer, goes door to door in this rich neighborhood called Belle Meade, begging for a job, kind of works his way through that and just works his way through school and volunteers for World War II. And comes back and he because he was able to get a degree, he went back sharecropping, but he did have that degree. So then when a position opened up at the school, because at that time the rest of the economy was kind of shut down. If you're in rural, like if you was teaching at the school, like that was teaching and preaching, like that was the epitome of what you could be. But he was able to kind of create a better way of life and push the virtue and the importance of education on down. And I just started looking at that, and then I went all the way back to the top of the tree, and it was the top of our tree. We trace it back to Nathaniel and Amelia Simmons, and who were born into slavery. I love the story because at one of the family reunions, the story was told about Nathaniel. This is in rural West Tennessee after the Civil War, so you have a lot of backlash, right, to the emancipation of the formerly freed slaves, and they really used for a century violent intimidation, either physical violence or economic violence. Even we talked about the story of Ruby Bridges in New Orleans. Like the first thing they did was they fired her dad and his employer. So they would take your job, they would try to take your livelihood or take your life. That's how they kept physical intimidation. So, and whatever, they said the Klan came and got Nathaniel Simmons one day and they never saw him again. But Nathaniel Simmons had a son named Reuben Simmons. And I think that Nathaniel passed the spirit down to Reuben. And then Reuben married a lady named Annie Bishop. And they had a son named Terrell Buck Simmons. And then he got the spirit. He got that Nathaniel Simmons spirit. And Terrell Buck Simmons married we got with Lizzie Yarborough and had Burnell Simmons. Burnell Simmons married Lula Cole. And they had Vanessa Simmons. Vanessa Simmons married Philip Bright. They had Marcus Bright. And I still got the Nathaniel Simmons spirit in me.
Yes.
That before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. So I just thought about, legacy. And that's when I opened the book to where I can keep trying to drive this car and then lose my life trying to save a car. Or I can, we have a short window. I can preserve my life and then try to, because ultimately that's what we're going to leave is legacy. We're all going to leave here, at some point. As I've studied, I had a grandfather on the other side. I won't go through all that, but even, my dad didn't meet him. He never met him, but he became a big pastor, and it's a long story in LA. But just in me learning about him, because I look just like him, and me learning about him, I was able to grow, inspiration from that, because a lot of the traits, have been passed down in whatever way. And so you can just kind of learn, you learn from your family, and that's how I think you live in perpetuity, and just the continuation. You learn from the continuation of our struggle to progress to a better future, brighter future.
Brighter future. There we go. Brighter future. Any questions from our audience?
Question.
Yeah.
So you were talking about earlier about the voting rights for imprisoned people who were in prison, but you even see with that there could be another gatekeeper, because after the law was passed, which white and black Republican Democrats supported it, but you had DeSantis come in and say they have fines paid, they have to have all this other things. So even though the law was passed, it's still barriers for people who were in prison to even vote still here in Florida.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of times we celebrate, we should celebrate, the passage of a law, and then we fall asleep in implementation.
Mm.
Implementation is something that has to constantly be monitored, and you know about it, but you got to create a whole new window to address that, because that has to be dramatized. You have to dramatize an issue because there are a lot of different issues, and if there's not a steady drumbeat, or if that's not in the media, if you see anytime there's a mass shooting, then we talk about gun control. We talk about you have to do something to dramatize it, and then you have to like you say, the gatekeepers, like those that are making the laws, those that are making that's why it is important to vote, because DeSantis was able to use his executive power regulations to kind of shape how a law is implemented on the ground. Brown v. Board of Education passed as a policy 54. State said we ain't doing it. And so you had to have a whole nother movement just to get them to implement stuff.
So true.
A lot of what King's work and the movement's work was like the freedom rides. They passed the previous law that you can't have segregated interstate bus travel, and they just ignored it completely. And so these individuals started riding from Washington D.C. and said, we're going to expose this to the country. And so it wasn't until you saw John Lewis and those folks getting beat, and they bombed the Greyhound bus and Anniston, and then they had to go into that Birmingham tunnel, and they got beat to an inch of their life, and then they went to Montgomery and got beaten again, and then Dr. King was in. They surrounded the church, and they had to get but all of that drama, it put pressure. You got to put pressure on the politics string, because the Kennedys didn't want to deal with that. They didn't want to deal with civil rights because they didn't want to lose the Southern vote, so they had to be made to deal with it. You got to make people deal with the issue, but then you have to have somebody in the policy stream, because really the law of the legislators should be actually to write and propose legislation. I think that I think that's lost on a lot of our politicians. Like, this is not. I understand the need to develop, to be president, to develop constituency relations and that kind of thing. But sometimes it's like people are using these elected offices as like a all access social pass. Like, I get VIP every social event. I'm here. Hey, where is the legislation? Where's the policy? You should be talking about policy. I appreciate, but not you got a banquet here and there. That's cool. But just doing banquets every day and just they're doing jumping jacks in the park and all that. You need that, but like policy, like we have, like they, I'm disappointed in our that we don't have more policies. Like even and I'm a Harris supporter, but like hopefully we see more policy leading, because I think that if you like live with like a universal early learning coverage public option, and people could feel the impact of policy on their life, like, man, I need to vote for this. Like, this could really improve my life. Like, they do this right here. I don't have to pay for childcare anymore. Like, that can really impact me versus like I'm just rooting for like the Tennessee Volunteers football. My team won. I don't get nothing. You know what I'm saying? Good for them.
Right.
Maybe we can live. Let's all live vicariously through the Dolphins winning. Salute. Good for the community pride, but like we can't live.
Yeah, but to follow up on your point about how things can be done to interfere with legislation that's been passed.
Yeah.
Oftentimes legislation is passed but with no way to fund it.
Yep.
So they say you can do this, or they mandate that, and maybe if it's at the federal level, they put it on the states, and each state makes its own decision. That's not what we need.
Yep.
Because that's not going to work.
Yeah.
Because we know the states are not going to follow through. So, legislation does need to be passed, but also how to fund these various programs has to be a part of it. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And then the other point was you talked about some of the legislators, it's a free event, a way to. But the other thing is, and it's part of, I think, what's really broken with politics in this country is how much it costs to run for a position.
Yeah.
It is ridiculous, because if we took that money and spent it on social programming, we could solve almost every problem that we have in terms of programs that need to be run. It
Yeah.
is just crazy. So politicians are often also trying to raise money. So instead of
Hey.
focusing on policy, they're out there politicking to raise funds so that they can be elected. It is just outrageous.
All day and often doing the bidding of those.
Right.
biggest
Who support
donors,
it,
yeah.
right.
Right.
We
Yeah,
really need to change that. That system is just horrible.
yeah, you're right about that. I mean, they may spend $1 billion on this election
I
cycle.
know.
What on what?
Crazy, right?
Okay, before we get into a whole political discussion, because I feel like we might go there.
No,
Any questions about the book, and then we can go into the politics in a second.
well, that was awesome.
Yes, that was. But I saw him raising his hand. I already know how Pearson goes. I was like,
Well, it was reference to the book. You talked about, well, I don't know, you talked about childcare in New York in regards to that's something that should be done here in Florida.
Yeah.
But that is something that I think the Harris team has focused on, but the
Yeah.
early childcare credit, especially for newborn children. So that feeds in. So there is some policy, maybe not as much as some people like, but the other people have no policy. So
Oh yeah, no,
a little bit, So
for sure, no, for sure.
awesome. Thank you for a great point.
Yeah, thank you.
Aitza?
So you mentioned in your book you have the 3 streams, right? So the problem, the politics, and the policy. But I find that, especially in our communities, our Black and brown communities, we're taught to do things in silo.
Yeah.
Although, like, I believe that we work better in collaboration.
Yeah.
So what would you say for people that are reading your book and haven't gotten there, that still having that mindset that I have to succeed alone instead of succeeding together, so that they can kind of collaborate, right? If you're good in one stream, that's okay, but you'll be better if you find people in the other 2 streams.
Yeah, I mean I think when we're talking about the systems bridge, you can only go so far by yourself. You can only even systems level 2 is the farthest you can go in terms of how I broke it down, as a solo operator. But it's the ability you need a team. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yeah.
And that's something I've even had to learn in my own journey, that we have to work as a team and find the right team to complement you and will work with you, even as we. I'll just use it as an example with the Economic Advocacy Trust and these are policy advocacy agenda events we're trying to. The 23rd, 24th, and 25th, by the way, the Purple Church down south. 23rd, the New Jerusalem Impact Church on the 24th in Liberty City, kind of central area, and the Betty T. Ferguson Recreational Complex in Miami Gardens. But it's only going to be as strong as the people, as the kind of coalitions and different organizations that you can bring to build pressure. Because I'm speaking about it in a policy context, but you need mass pressure. You need mass. You need a lot of people. You need coalitions that are willing to do, or at least or at least if it's not going to be a lot of people, you need people who are doing the right things to elevate it in a particular way. So, I mean, there's always everybody has their own unique gifts and skill sets, and so you find those that it's particularly be in your business. Congratulations on a grantee. So obviously, as you scale, you have to build a team around it. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's give Dr. Marcus Bright a big round of applause for being here. Thank you so much, my brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Listen, his books are here to purchase. Please go ahead and get a signed copy. One of the few times you can get a signed copy from Dr. Marcus Bright. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Gracias, love.
Which book do you recommend we go first?
Well, this one lays out kind of the full extent of the bridges, and then that's 15, and then